Take a girl and a guy, and they fall madly in love and form a family. Sprinkle in some counseling degrees and a doctorate, a dream of transforming relationships as we know it. And 20 years later, we give you power couple Dr. Ray and Jean Kadkodian. And this is their podcast, Couples Synergy.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Couple Synergy with Dr. Ray and Jean. Hi, I am Dr. Ray.
And I'm Jean. This is our podcast about love, marriage, and relationships.
Be sure to check us out online at couplesynergy.com or on Facebook and Instagram at Couple Synergy. And please subscribe to our podcast, leave us a review, or send us any suggestions on topics you'd like to hear more about. And now on to Couple Synergy, an in-depth look at love, marriage, and relationships, where we bring you our experience helping thousands of couples transform their relationships for over 25 years.
You know, everyone says you should work on your relationship, but nobody teaches us how. So we've created this podcast to teach people what they can do to create the relationship they've always dreamed of
with the partner they fell in love with. Just as a reminder for those of you listening to our podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, this is also a live podcast that is done every Monday at 6 p.m. Central Time. And join us if you want to ask questions or just show up and say hi. We love saying hi to people who are our listeners or viewers of our podcast. The podcast also is live on YouTube. It's also live on Twitter and LinkedIn as well. So a lot of places that you guys can access this podcast and also interact with us directly. So today we are talking about sexless marriage, which is a huge issue. It's a huge problem and a lot more of an issue than people really realize. I just, when we were talking about doing this topic, this song just came to my mind because in the 80s, I think this is the 80s, it was a really big song, right? Let's talk about sex.
Well, they were talking back then because nobody was talking about it and people were getting sick.
Yeah. And so, since then, there has been quite an evolution or de-evolution of intimacy and sex within marriage, to the point that there are times that we will meet with couples who will report that they haven't had sex in years. Many years. I think the longest time that we have heard has been 11 years.
A sexless marriage is defined as a couple who has not had sex for 1 year.
Right.
And a low sex marriage is a couple who has had sex less than 10
times a year. Right. And, I think that we can't really talk about this a sexless marriage or a low sex marriage without talking about all of the factors that are involved in that, because we see that sex and money as a barometer of the health of the relationship
and the health of the individual person.
For sure.
If you think about a baby and this baby's never touched, how sad, how lonely.
Yeah.
We're no different. And the first person we stop touching is typically our partner. And we'll still hug our friends and we'll still take care of our kids, but our partner will shy away from because it's more vulnerable. And we live in this strange time where in 10 seconds, you could see hundreds of naked people just by picking up your phone. And
sometimes without even trying, you could be exposed to that.
Yeah. And that can hijack you on a physical level. It's physically stimulating, but mentally it puts you in shock, puts you in fight or flight, which does not lend to intimacy with another human being. And then emotionally, it shuts you down.
So we are flooded with this overexposure, literal overexposure in our society. And we are exposed to other people, being sexually provocative and sexual imagery and all of that. But then within our own personal committed relationship, that decreases. And they coincide with each other.
Yeah. I think it would be interesting. I've never seen any statistics on this to see if people who let it all hang out are actually not having very much sex.
Yeah, that would be
and
interesting.
people who are more modest are probably having more sex. But what it does to us to have a sexless marriage, to be in a relationship where we're not having affection, when we're not having intimacy, it leads to depression, anxiety, and actually low self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
You know, your self-esteem is like, what my person doesn't notice me. They don't care to be around me. They don't want to feel me. They don't want me touching them. And there's a great rejection that happens when we say no to sex with our partner. Not that you should be a sex slave to your partner either, but if so much time is passing and there's no intimacy and you've gotten to the place where you almost can't tolerate it, it is probably one of the cruelest ways to live in the world.
Yeah, and I think one of the mistakes that a lot of therapists out there do is that they prescribe or recommend that the couple just put sex on the calendar, right? And make it into something that is consistent, right? So just, if you're not having sex, then you should just do it, right? And that is not the case, from our perspective at all. Really, what we want to ask is the why, right? Where is that coming from? What's it attached to? What's it bringing up within a relationship? Because most often it is connected to shame.
Yeah, and I would say those things change over the course of a relationship. And so if you're not talking about, we did this exercise, open, close them, to talk about, when your partner does this certain behavior, does it make you feel more open and connected and bonded and like sharing with them, or does it close you down? And, when you're in the early stages of a relationship and you have kids and life is busy, there may not be as much time for the cuddling on the couch or the walks together or the talking about things, but there may be other touch points that are different, but then that might not be tolerable later in life. But I think people really don't know themselves. And I think when we're early in a relationship, we go, what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
Where did my sex drive go? Am I not attracted to my partner? My kid's been hanging on me all day. I'm overwhelmed with touch. We've heard all those kind of things.
Or even worse, just minimizing it to physical issues. Right. I'm, my hormones are off, or maybe I need to take a pill or something in order to build that intimacy, or that spark back up. And that's not necessarily the case. It's just treating a symptom, right? And not really looking at the deeper problem that it's connected to.
Yeah, there's nothing sexy about spending your day doing whatever it is you do, working, taking care of kids, paying bills, and then jumping into bed and having sex.
Yeah, that's
it's too big of a swoop.
Yeah,
our minds can't catch up, even if our bodies can, and that might work for certain points of your relationship. But over time, that will grow resentment, especially if you're giving in, or if you're just, even if you're the one who wants to have sex, if your partner's not really present. It can't be a good feeling either.
And when you're talking about shifting gears like that, I think we also need to talk about intention, right? If someone or a couple is just having stress sex, then that's not necessarily connection and bonding. It's really more of a, kind of self-pleasing type of perspective or approach to sex versus a complete connection, right? And true intimacy between a couple that is often not nurtured, and rightly so. A lot of couples don't have the time, as you were saying. They don't have the time to nurture. They got kids, they've got full-time jobs, careers, they're trying to pay bills and survive in this society today. And so who has the time to really just put in that nurture and put in that investment?
If you are finding time to go on vacation with your partner, and on vacation you're having some good sex, that tells you your life's pretty overwhelmed, when you're not on vacation. But it does tell you there's still a good connection, intimacy in your relationship when you do devote the time and energy towards it. And, there's a really interesting kind of narrative in our world about what can I get? What do I need? How is my partner letting me down? My needs are not being met, as opposed to how much am I investing? What am I giving? What am I doing to help my partner feel less stress? What am I doing to help my partner feel like I'm thinking about them and care about them? And the difference between those two things is one you have control over and one you don't. And the one that you don't have control over is what you're receiving. And the world's kind of taught us to be focused on that, to be focused on
what can I get?
What can I get?
Right.
Yeah.
You need to meet my needs, right? Versus, giving is what you have control over. You have control over whether you're going to give or whether you're going to give in. And, the opposite of that is receiving or taking. And that's really, you can really clarify as far as the quality of your intimacy and quality of your sex life based on just those two comparisons, right? Are you giving and is your partner receiving, or are you just giving in and your partner is taking, right? And that's really going to clarify the intention behind your sexual connection.
And the really cool thing is, if you're doing it right, you both win. And if you're doing it wrong, you both lose. And you can feel it. You can feel the difference between I'm going to choose to show up and give to my partner, and I'm not going to be worried about what I get back. And you feel a fullness just in the giving, as opposed to, could you do this song and dance routine for me? Can you blah, 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 blah. And then both of you feel this like force and this letdown, and it's not a great feeling at all. No.
In fact, most often it's going to result in the feeling of guilt.
Yeah.
It's not going to be complete, true mutual satisfaction. Someone's going to feel guilty.
And so much happens with our intimacy long before we get to bed. And if there isn't touch points during the day, if you're not saying, hey, how's your day going, through a text, through a call, if when you walk past your partner in the house, you're not reaching out and touching them in some way, you guys are starting at zero, absolutely ground zero. And, it's like if you were super stressed out, maybe you just had a really busy meeting and there's problems, and then you're worried because your kids have some issue you're not tending to, and now try to go get a massage.
Oh, your brain is going to be all like that, right?
And even if you can settle down, it's going to take some time. And we're trying to go from that level of stress to having sex without any of the in-between stuff, which is work. There was a sex therapist that we interviewed on the show, and she said, this couple comes in and they're like, how often are you having sex? They're like, once every 6 weeks or so. And, and then she asked them, how often would you like to? And the husband was like, once a week. And she goes, all right, I'll have sex with you once a week. But what I'd like you to do is take a shower and light some candles and play some soft music and give me a back rub. And then we'll have sex once a week. He goes, all right, I'll be fine with it once every 6 weeks.
He just didn't want to go through the effort. Right. So that's where he is just taking and not giving, right? Or not just receiving and giving and receiving. That's, mutual satisfaction there versus giving in and taking. And, it's amazing to think about just how much effort and how much investment it really does take to have that connection with your partner. Is it going to happen all the time? Is it going to happen every single time you have sex? No, it's not. It absolutely is not, right? But if the majority of your connection and the consistency of your sexual connection is this giving in and taking, then you could see this degradation of that connection, of that intimacy between the two of you.
Which increases your anxiety.
For sure.
Increases your depression. Decreases your feelings of self-worth, connection, and belonging. So it's a big deal. And it actually leads to physical illness because our stress levels stay high and then our body starts to break down. So there's so many good reasons to take that time and energy and effort and give that towards your partner. It's hard though. It's not always the easiest thing to do.
Yeah. When we're talking about, passing them in the kitchen and reaching out and touching them, we're not just talking about like giving them a pat on the butt. No,
No,
that's not
that's
the
usually a
same
closum.
thing.
It's a closum for women. I think guys might like it better.
Well, I just remember when we did our enhancement weekend, where we were teaching that technique of open closum, right? And they were closing their eyes, and we said, when your partner comes by and gives you a little tap on the butt, and the guys were like, I'm open to that, and the women were like, no, I'm closed to that. And then the look on their face when they saw each other's answers, like, really, you're not okay with that?
And the reason is, for women, the way our brains work is we're paying attention to so many things. And so if she's listening for if the kids are okay, and if dinner's burning, and she's doing some dishes, and now here's one more thing that's grabbing her attention and distracting her from things that are important in that moment. So it's an irritant. As for guys, if they're sort of like, oh, sex,
right,
and everything else goes away. So there's reasons for that, because that's how our brains work. And so the things that are much lovelier for women are foot rubs and back rubs and hugs and all the kind of things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's definitely a very complex issue. Mm-hmm. And it does not have a very simple answer to it, or a checklist that you have to follow and everything's going to be good. And what we know about sexual intimacy in a long-term relationship is that it does evolve over time, and the factors that a couple's going through, during the stages of development in a relationship affects their sexual connection. I mean, I don't think it's, a couple that has got kids and they have struggling with their jobs and their careers and trying to make ends meet, the quality of their sexual connection is going to be totally affected by all of those factors involved, versus a couple that's going through a midlife crisis, or a couple that are becoming empty nesters. Now they're finding themselves alone in the house for the first time in how many years. And so now that's another factor that's going to affect their sexual connection too. And then also how much a couple works on it and talks about it, right? And I think that talking about it is really the most important part, because most often people keep it to themselves.
Yeah, when we're sitting in front of a couple for the first time, we ask them, how often are you intimate? And then we ask them, how did you guys decide that?
Yeah.
And they look at each other, and it wasn't a conscious choice. It was a reaction to something. It was an assumption that they are thinking about their partner, and none of it was ever talked about. And it leaves this emptiness in us. I always thought about that with like someone like, who was Superman? What was that guy's name?
Clark Kent?
Well, the actor that got paralyzed.
Oh, Christopher Reeve.
Yeah. And like, I'm sure him and his wife went from having this normal, healthy relationship to he's paralyzed. And not only is he now a sexless person, where does that leave her? And what did they do with that? Did she just become caretaker, or did they find ways of still connecting and bonding and loving each other? And, I think if I was in that situation, I for sure would want to find those alternatives, even if physically somebody couldn't. And I think, unfortunately, what we do is we go the other way, and it becomes too uncomfortable or painful. We don't talk about it, and we don't do it. And it's always amazing to me that people can live in a relationship of contempt for decades. Where you guys know people like this, couples who complain about each other
and conflict all
cut
the
each
time.
other down in front of other people, and they'll stay together for a very, very, very long time.
And surprisingly, for those of you out there, those couples actually have a lot of sex.
Some of
them have a lot, and it's
the really turmoil ones,
right?
Yeah.
Because the connection is based on the chaos.
Yeah,
it's not about bonding or feeling close to each other. It is part of the chaotic cycle.
That's the only time they're not in pain.
Yeah.
So it's like, when they finally cool off enough to say, "Oh, you're still here," but very painful ways to live. Very, very painful. And the work of it, the helping each other soften into the relationship. And then, if there's sex without love, if you just, hopefully you're not in a relationship and you're like on Tinder or something like that, and you're hooking up with someone, there's something that happens at the end of that. At the end of that, there's a desire to run from that person. But when you're in a love bonded, committed relationship, at the end of physical sexual intimacy, there is a drive to hold each other, because that's when the bonding chemicals come out.
It should be a drive.
Right. And sometimes people take that space when our bodies are in this place, because all that serotonin and oxytocin is released. And instead of holding our partner, we are dealing with the children or picking up our phones or petting the dog. And we're not really using that bonding time, which increases our immune system, which makes us feel safe and comfortable and connected in the world, which reduces our depression and anxiety. And we are missing that piece of it, even after going through the motions of having physical intimacy.
I just have to say that, in our experience over 25 years of working with people, people are so much more angry.
Yeah.
And that plays a factor
absolutely
in bonding with your partner. And countless number of people are just angry all the time, and angry at this person, at that person, just their outside world. And so when you take that home with you, that's got to go somewhere. And so a lot of times we see that, going at their partner, and then that just perpetuates more conflict within their relationship.
And I would say, pay attention to how you feel in the shows that you watch, when you're getting messages from radio or walking down the street, and you're bombarded with stuff, and you may not realize all those subtle messages that are out there that make you feel like the world's a little less safe, or it is provocative, and it wants you to be in that place of turmoil or anger. And then it doesn't make sense that you have those feelings because nothing happened.
Yeah.
Right. But you get on the radio and they're like, have you been checked for this cancer? Or are you this? Or you're like, like, oh, if you're over 62, you might be at risk for this. I'm like, oh my God. You're walking around like,
Or every other billboard as you're driving down the Kennedy in Chicago is about hair loss.
Yeah.
Right. And testosterone and, lack of a sex drive for men. And it is just so pervasive in your face.
Oh, did you see the one that was like, smoke pot, it's better than sex? It was something like that.
Wait, was that a billboard that was in Chicago?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And you think how sad that they would want you to replace zoning out with the deepest connection we could have with another human being.
Well, it minimizes the risk of rejection.
It sure does.
Right? I mean,
it only increases the risk of eating more food.
Well,
the munchies. But yeah, I mean,
then there's the lost billboard right after that, right?
Yeah, it's the other thing that we're doing less of, ourselves included, is exercise
and meditation.
And both of those things help balance our hormones and keep us healthy, so we have the energy and the drive to want to be sexually active with our partner. And it's so much easier, and this is why married couples are fatter, to just sit on the couch and say, not today. I'm not going to go work out today. And it's so easy to get in that rut and so hard to keep yourselves motivated and moving. But it does show up in your physical health, your emotional health, and your mental well-being.
As we have said, that sexual intimacy is a barometer for the connection that a couple has. And so we have to look at all of the factors that are involved in that. All right. Sexless marriage is not something that happens overnight. Right. It is something that happens gradually over time, little by little. Think about the whole frog in a boiling water analogy, or is it a metaphor?
Metaphor.
I can never get that right. But think of that as in regards to the connection that a couple has.
There's also, it's not very bonding and connecting if you're slighting your partner all the time. And we slight each other quite a bit. And it's often has to do with not sharing information because we'd rather sit on our phones or talking to other people and not sharing those things with our partner. And those can be another like kind of low grade push away from intimacy that you might not even be aware of. It's not a good feeling as someone's partner to find out things that you just didn't choose to share with them.
Well, you think about being out with a friend and, you're talking to them and then they pick up their phone and they're sitting there looking at stuff on their phone. Immediately you feel just totally rejected and cut off. And you're like, what do I do? Do I just sit here and wait for them? Do I say anything? Do I pick up my own phone? And so that is just in a friendship, right? Interaction. So think about
which I think we're more likely to do in a friendship. To not do that. Right.
Because we're being more considerate about the person we're talking to. But now you think about in your committed partnership, how often are you doing that to each other? How often are you like slighting each other and paying attention to other things and making your partner feel less important?
The same thing is true if you had someone over to your home. You'd greet them at the door. You'd hug them hello. You would walk them to the door, hug them goodbye. But often when our partner comes home, there's no acknowledgement that either one of you even knows the other one is there. So there's so many little ways we slight each other that really lead to that distrust and that contempt over time. And nobody really talks about it because it always seems like, well, you're being so sensitive. But you know what? If you want to have a healthy sex life, you need to be sensitive. That's all there is to it. And there's so much in this world that desensitizes us. And so, think about that. Think about how sensitive are you and see that as not a weakness, but a strength that you're paying attention. You're paying attention to who's in your home and where your partner is. And if you care about them and letting them know that, and that increase of sensitivity makes you more open to the touch. It makes you more open to the conversations. It ultimately makes you feel more connected.
Well, we want to thank all of you for joining us today on Couple Synergy on this topic of sexless marriage, which is a very important one. Our passion is helping couples and people have happy and healthy relationships. And this podcast gives us a fun way of bringing our knowledge and expertise to you, our listeners. For all of you listening or watching us online, please let us know how you enjoy the show. If you have any questions, comments, or topic suggestions, please email us at contact@couplesynergy.com. For more information about Couple Synergy and our programs such as Relationship 101, the home study course, which you can do at home as a couple, the Couples Relationship Enhancement Weekend, and our premier coaching program called Couple to Couple, look us up online at couplesynergy.com.
And if you know someone who could benefit from this episode, please download it and share it. And thank you for listening.
Until next time, synergize your life and synergize your love.
You have been listening to Couple Synergy with Dr. Ray and Jean Ketkodian. Couple Synergy was recorded, edited, and produced by Dr. Ray and Jean Ketkodian. Voiceover and music entitled Breathe and Let Go was recorded and composed by Gina Gonzalez.